10 stars who said their movies are trash. Hey everyone, and welcome back to The Screeny. Everyone likes to complain about hating their job every now and then, including the people who lead glamorous lifestyles and spend their days on movie sets. Enormous fortune and international fame didn't stop some of Hollywood's biggest names from biting the hand that feeds them and bad-mouthing the projects that brought them to prominence. Let's take a look at 10 stars who said their movies are trash. Remember to press the subscribe button to learn more about your favorite movies and TV shows every day. Number 10. Mark Hamill, The Last Jedi. Star Wars actors are no strangers to criticizing the franchise that put them on the map. Alec Guinness described it as fairy tale rubbish. Harrison Ford didn't think his character was interesting, and Carrie Fisher sometimes wished she never accepted the role in the first place. Mark Hamill wasn't on the same page with his co-stars and had nothing but words of praise for the original Star Wars trilogy. Although, he had a change of heart after receiving the script for The Last Jedi, because the Luke Skywalker he played in his youth was nowhere to be found. Hamill even told the director Rian Johnson he fundamentally disagrees with every choice he made for the character. That didn't stop him from doing his job and trying to realize Johnson's vision in the best way he knew how. Hamill later apologized for voicing his doubts and insecurities to the public because creative differences are best kept private. Number 9. Daniel Craig, James Bond. No matter how many amazing roles he plays in the future, Daniel Craig will always be remembered as James Bond. And something tells us he's not fine with that idea. Shortly after Spectre wrapped up, Craig said he'd rather slash his wrists than do another movie about Agent 007 ever again. The actor even went so far to claim he would only return for the money and nothing else. The interview proved to be extremely controversial, and Craig regretted using such graphic language to capture his frustration. He went straight into that interview only 2 days after finishing shooting and failed to find the right words. Instead of saying something with style and grace, Craig said, "I gave a really stupid answer," and later he wished he could take it all back. He wasn't even the first actor who felt this way about playing James Bond. Sean Connery also detested the character, saying he wants to kill him and refused to make an appearance at the 50th anniversary of Agent 007. Number 8. Ryan Reynolds, X-Men Origins. It's difficult to imagine anyone but Ryan Reynolds playing Deadpool, but there was a time when we would rather see anyone else in his signature spandex suit. The whole world is still trying to forget the disaster that was X-Men Origins Wolverine, but Reynolds is consistently reminding us of how terrible it is. He describes the filming process as a very frustrating experience, because he accepted the role before even reading the script. Things didn't get any better after filming kicked off, since the writers went on strike in the middle of the production. The script would just say Wade Wilson was supposed to show up and talk really fast. Reynolds was forced to make up his own lines and had no way of knowing if they're good or not. The world didn't fall in love with this character the first time around, but Ryan got a chance to fix him with the successful standalone movies that were released a few years down the road. The new Deadpool repeatedly made fun of his old self, and even traveled back in time to kill the X-Men Origins version of the character. Number 7. Robert Pattinson, Twilight. No one hated Twilight more than the guy who was foolish enough to accept the role of Edward Cullen, and he made that clear over and over and over again. Robert Pattinson's loathing of the franchise that made him famous is everyone's favorite thing about these movies, and it gets more hilarious every time he does it. His open contempt for Twilight isn't something that just developed over time. Rob felt it from the very first moments he read the books, and said they shouldn't have been published in the first place. Once the last film in the saga wrapped up, Pattinson made it pretty clear he couldn't care less. After being asked if he wanted to take anything from the set to remind him of this experience, he simply said, "My dignity." He later managed to reinvent himself as a serious indie actor and received amazing reviews for his roles in movies like Rover and Good Times. When a question about his willingness to reprise the role of Edward Cullen popped up, Pattinson said he's ready to play 17 at a moment's notice, but it was obviously another one of his sarcastic jabs. Number 6. Megan Fox, Transformers. Transformers movies made tons tons of money, but they were critically slammed by everyone in their right mind, including the actors involved in them. Megan Fox rose to prominence thanks to her role in these movies, but that didn't stop her from openly stating that they're garbage. The actress recognized the fact that this film series opened many doors for her, but said she doesn't want to blow smoke up people's ass. She explained everyone should know what they're getting into when watching Transformers, and expect nothing more than dumb fun. That still didn't change the fact that Fox felt extremely uncomfortable being associated with the portrayal of women in this franchise. She felt her acting was terrible because Michael Bay gave her nothing to do. He just had her bending over cars in revealing outfits most of the time. Megan Fox compared the famous action director to Hitler, said he's a nightmare to work with, and claimed he made her clean his Ferrari and had her on a strict skin tanning regimen. She probably changed her mind later on since she accepted his invitation to star in the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles reboot. Number 5. Jim Carrey, Kick-Ass 2. Most actors who condemned their movies were reasonable enough to wait it out. But not Jim Carrey. He despised Kick-Ass 2 so much that he didn't even show up to promote it and openly talked about how appalled he was by the level of violence in the movie. The famous comedian decided to withdraw his support after the Sandy Hook shooting and said he had a change of heart in the light of recent events. Carrey apologized to everyone else involved with Kick-Ass 2 after making these statements, but director Mark Miller was still hurt by his comments. He explains movies like this one are always going to have some blood on the floor, and compared it to the works of Quentin Tarantino and Martin Scorsese. Miller insisted Kick-Ass 2 is focused on the consequences of violence rather than violence itself. A majority of the critics didn't disagree with his statements though, and described this sequel as the lesser version of the original. Number 4. Katherine HEIGL, Knocked Up. Katherine HEIGL doesn't have a lot of critically acclaimed movies on her resume, but that's not stopping her from complaining about the ones that made her famous. The romantic comedy Knocked Up, directed by Judd Apatow, is one of the most notable examples. HEIGL described this movie as sexist because it paints female characters in a negative light. She felt the lovable and goofy roles in this film were reserved for the guys, while women got to play humorless and uptight shrews. The director Judd Apatow and HEIGL's co-star Seth Rogen accused her of hypocrisy because she later starred in several films that portrayed women in a much worse way, including the movie The Ugly Truth. The Grey's Anatomy star tried to publicly apologize for her comments, but never actually called Apatow to say sorry, and the director admitted that he was hurt by her actions. He couldn't look at the experience of filming Knocked Up in the same way anymore, because he knew there was a person on set who didn't enjoy being there. Number 3. Channing Tatum, G.I. Joe. Channing Tatum made zero effort to hide his opinion about his starring vehicle G.I. Joe: The Rise of Cobra. He was forced into doing this project because of his contract with Paramount, but being a part of it left a bad taste in his mouth. The worst thing about this whole story is that Tatum was actually a huge fan of this fictional soldier growing up, and didn't want to taint the memory by starring in a project that failed to honor this legacy. Tatum had to suck it up in order to avoid the lawsuit, but G.I. Joe: The Rise of Cobra turned out to be everything he feared it would be, a cartoonish, over-the-top action fest propelled by silly writing, inconsistent visual effects, and merely passable performances. Number 2. Shia LaBeouf, Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. Even if you really dislike the projects you worked on, you probably shouldn't shout about it from the rooftops. But Shia LaBeouf obviously didn't get the memo. He had a thing or two to say about some of the biggest box office successes of his career, including Indiana Jones and The Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. He acknowledged the fact the script wasn't great from the get-go, but believed it was his responsibility as an actor to make it work. Shia failed to do that, and apologized for dropping the ball on the legacy that people loved and cherished. To make things even worse, he wasn't impressed by the living legend Steven Spielberg either. LaBeouf claims that the person he met wasn't the one he dreamt of, and said he's more a company than a director. He later came to his senses and admitted he probably shouldn't go around bashing Steven Spielberg because he gave him a lot of opportunities over the years. Number 1. Harrison Ford, Blade Runner. Harrison Ford went on the record saying he wasn't fond of several of his iconic characters, but came back to play them over and over again. Rick Deckard from the cult classic Blade Runner is a case in this point. One of the parts he despised the most about this movie was the voice-over narration. Ford claimed he went kicking and screaming to the studio to record it. He believes that this audition didn't feel like an organic part of the film and agreed to do it only because he was forced to. The voiceover wasn't the only issue Harrison Ford had with Blade Runner. The legendary actor admitted this is not one of his favorite films because he was stuck playing a detective who did not have any detecting to do. That didn't stop him from reprising his role in the sequel 35 years later. He described his return to the universe as a very gratifying experience. Thank you very much for watching today's video. Make sure to subscribe to our channel for more amazing content, and don't forget to check out one of the other 2 videos on your screen.